Okay, so I have us still in chapter 2 of Joshua, the top of page 11, verse 16. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shekidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. So again, page 11 in our books, and I think I'll read to the end of the chapter. Our two spies just made a deal or took an oath with Rahav, their hostess, so that she and her family would be protected. So we pick up then verse 16. Vatomer lahem hahara lechu pen yifkeu vachem harodfim v'nachbetem shama shloshet yamim ad shov harodfim va'achar telchu l'darkechem vayomru eleha ha'anashim nekiyim anachnu mishvuatech hazeh asher hishbatanu hine anachnu va'im ba'aretz et tikvat chut hashani hazeh tikshiri b'chalon asher horadetenu vo ve'et avich ve'et imech ve'et achayich ve'et kol beit avich ta'asfi elayich habayata v'haya kol asher yetze midalte ve'techa chutza damo ve'rosho v'anachnu nekiyim v'chol asher yihiyeh itach babayit damo ve'roshenu ki'im yad tihiyeh bo v'im tagidi et varenu zeh v'hayinu nekiyim mishvuatech asher hishpatanu v'tomer kedivrechem kenhu v'teshalchem v'yelechu v'tikshur et tikvat hashani b'chalon v'yelchu v'yavau hahara v'yeshvu sham shloshet yamim ad shavu harodfim v'yevakshu harodfim b'chol haderech v'lo matza'u v'yashuvu shnei ha'anashim v'yerdu mehahar v'ya'avru v'yavau el Yehoshua bin Nun v'yasapru lo et kol hamotzot otam v'yomru el Yehoshua ki natan Adonai biyadenu et kol haaretz v'gam namogu kol yoshvei haaretz mipanenu. So she said to them, go to the mountain so that the pursuers can't touch you or won't touch you. And hide there for 3 days until the pursuers come back, and then go on your way. All right, hide in the mountains for 3 days. That way the pursuers, that is the soldiers from Jericho, won't be able to find you. They'll give up the search, and then you can go on your way. And the men said to her, we will be free from this oath of yours that we swore to. That means that is the following conditions have to apply to the oath, and if they don't, then we will be free from the oath. Okay, that I think that's what is meant by verse 17 here. Hine anachnu va'im ba'aretz. Here we're going to come back to the land. This scarlet thread or rope you should tie in your window, from which we were already let out. Okay, so from the window that you let us out, tie this red thread, and your father and your mother and your brothers and all of your father's house gather to you in your house. Okay, and when anyone leaves your house to go outside, his blood is on his head, and we are guiltless or blameless. and everyone who is in, or everything that will be in with you in the house, then his blood is on our head, if anything happens to him. Okay, you get the conditions. As long as people are in the house, we guarantee that nothing will happen to them. But once they leave the house, then you guarantee that something will happen to them. Okay? Yes, Bess.
The expression, it shall be upon your head or his head,
Yeah.
The responsibility, in other words, right?
Right.
Wait,
Yeah,
wait,
that's
is that-
the yes.
I'm trying to understand why that would come up as an expression. Have they-
Blood is on on their head. Let me see how Alter translates it. Just a second. What verse is it? 18. So let's see. When you come to this scarlet cord, you must tie in the window through which you and your father and your mother and all your own. And so whoever comes out of the doors of your house, says she, his blood shall be on his head. So he translates it literally. And there's no commentary. Alter does not have any commentary on it. I think the expression speaks for itself, and what the origin of it is, I don't know. I think it's literal. You know, if you're going to die, you're going to be dying by the sword, and you're going to be bleeding. So I think that literally means that you take your life in your hands, and blood, it also represents life. So it could be your life is in your hands. So verse 20, but you know, again, there's no commentary here in our book. There's no commentary in Alter about it. And if you share these words, then we would also be blameless from, or we be clear from this oath, which we have taken, right? So two conditions. Everybody has to stay in your house, and you can't divulge any of the details of this oath. Either way, if you let anybody out, or if you share any of the details of this oath, then we're free from this oath. Yes, Bess?
Is it an oath that we made or that you made us make?
It was, I'm literally translating from your oath that we swore.
So then, because the translation says that thou hast made us to swear. In other words, we took that oath because you insisted.
Right. So I'm not sure of the grammar. I think that we're based on the grammar. It can be translated that we have sworn. The last word in verse 20 is hishbatanu. So is that you made us swear, or simply we swore? So I think the English translation is the editor is more up on biblical Hebrew grammar, so I'm sure he's right that you made us swear. But I think that it is a yeah, I guess she initiated this, right? She wanted her life to be spared, so she initiated this oath that they agreed to back in what is it? Where is it? Oh yeah, verse 12. Yeah, so okay, verse 21. And she said, as your words they will be. So that's how I'm translating it. Yes, so I agree. And she sent them away, and they went, and she tied the scarlet thread or rope or whatever in the window. They went, and they came to the mountain, Doesn't say which mountain, but the mountain. And they stayed there 3 days until the pursuers returned. How they knew that they returned, I don't know. And the pursuers asked, meaning looked everywhere, b'chol haderech, and everywhere, and they didn't find them. And they returned, that is the 2 men, the 2 spies, vayashuvu shnei anashim, the 2 men returned, and they descended from the mountain, and they went, or passed over, they went, and they came to Joshua, son of Nun, and told him everything about them, or everything that happened to them. And they said to Joshua that God gave all this land into our hands, and all of the inhabitants will melt away before us. So these, I don't know how the 2 spies felt this, but they had the sense that the whole land, not just the city of Jericho, but the whole land of Israel is in our hands, and they'll all melt away before us. Now, this, I think, we need to keep in mind what Joshua himself was a spy. Remember when Moses sent the 12 spies, Joshua was one of them, and he was the one who said, have faith in God, we'll be able to defeat the inhabitants of the land of Canaan. The other 10 said, no way, they're too big, they're too strong, and the cities are too fortified. So this is Joshua certainly is keeping in mind what he himself said 38 years before to Moses. And now these 2 spies, without any prompting, and one of them is not disagreeing with the other, they are both of like mind, saying the entire land will melt away. The inhabitants of all the land will melt away before us. So easy pickings. Yes, Bess.
Sorry, I'm doing that. Is there a midrash who these 2 spies were?
I'm sure there is, and I don't know. I don't know. Why don't you Google that while I read the commentary?
They were from
Midrash, who were the 2 spies that went to Jericho? So if you do something like that, then you might get their names. And if you give the source, then I can look it up and I can find it on Safari and I can share my screen and we can read the Midrash together. Okay, so the commentary here is brief on page 11, down below, to the mountain or to the hill country, westward instead of eastward, and so throw the pursuers off the track. Moreover, the caves in the hills afforded excellent shelter. So that's fascinating. If they go westward from Jericho, so picture this. Any of us that have been to the Dead Sea and have gone by east, directly east from Jerusalem, you're going downhill almost immediately. Okay, so that's the Judean hills and the Judean desert. You're going down, and once you get all the way down into the valley, the road splits, it turns. You can turn left to go north on Route 90, and that would take you to Jericho, and go south, you see the Dead Sea. Okay, so in other words, if you're in Jericho facing north, left is west. East is where Joshua and all of the people of Israel are. So why is the commentary saying they should go west? That doesn't make sense to me. They're trying to get back to Joshua. They have to go east, and there are mountains there too. Those are the Jordanian hill country that makes the other side of the mountain from which the valley forms. Right, you got the Judean in Israel, and you got the Jordanian in Jordan, the Moabite hill country. So, and I think on the other side of the hill probably is where Joshua and the Israelites are. So for some reason, the commentary thinks they're going east. Going west. So I guess that would make sense if you want to throw your pursuers off the track, because the pursuers are thinking they're coming from the Israelites, so they go back to the Israelites. But maybe, but it would be a roundabout circuit then for these two men to take after those 3 days.
Jonah?
Find anything.
Yes. I just looked at two findings.
Yes.
One has the Midrash identifies the two spies sent by Joshua as Pinchas and Caleb, who
Interesting. Okay, that makes sense.
who disguised themselves as potters and went about crying, "Pottery here, whoever wishes, come and buy." They came to Rehab's house, and when she learned that the king of Jericho sought them, she wanted to hide the spies.
Right.
Okay.
That's our story. So the Midrash claims that it's Pinchas and Caleb. So Caleb is doing, well, I just wanted, before you go on to the next one, I just want to make sure everybody knows Caleb with Joshua 38 years before went, and he was the representative of the tribe of Judah. Pinchas is the grandson of Aaron, who speared the Israelite man and the Midianite woman who were cavorting in the camp, right? So in Baal Peor. So he speared the two of them. So that's who Pinchas and Caleb are. And the other one?
We aren't told who the two spies are, but Jewish tradition, speculation really, says they were faithful Caleb and the high priest Eliezer. Remember that all this takes place during the, okay, it doesn't matter. Okay.
All right, so Caleb, everybody, all the Midrash agrees it's Caleb. Midrash either says it's Eliezer or his son Pinchas. Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
But what makes it more interesting is that Pinchas as a Kohen, or Eliezer as a Kohen, is agreeing with Caleb to find refuge in a brothel. And that Pinchas, the very one who spears the Israelite man and Midianite woman for illicit sexual behavior, is now finding refuge in a brothel. So that's interesting how the Midrash could have come up with anybody, and they decide those two. Yeah,
it makes sense that Joshua would pick Caleb because he knows that he's an honest reporter.
Yes, or at least not just an honest reporter, but also would allow his faith to direct the kind of report back, right? So there's one thing to say exactly what you see without any commentary, and the other, since this is a religious mission, to see what you see and then put it in a religious context, that God is giving us the land and all the inhabitants are going to melt away before us. So that's a religious report. It's not a military report, because it's not independently corroborated. The indigenous Canaanite population is not going to say God is giving them the land and we're going to melt away before them. Okay, so verse 17 in the commentary, guiltless. If Rahab violated the conditions laid down in the following verses, right? She bound, that is the rope, later when Jericho was attacked by the Israelites. So in other words, she didn't do it then. She did it when Jericho was under attack. That's what the commentary suggests. Okay, it doesn't seem that way from the straight reading of the text, but the commentary suggests that it was done later. So now, the comment.
Question.
Yeah, go ahead,
So they put the ribbon so that they would know to not touch that house.
I think it was a sign for. It's kind of like putting the blood on the doorposts.
That's what I was just thinking.
So it's the same idea, I think, for God, for a sign to God to miraculously save that structure and the inhabitants of it.
Okay.
Yeah. So let's see what Alter has to say, beginning on the bottom of page 15 in his Ancient Israel. And she had said to them, the context requires construing the verb here and at the beginning of the next verse as pluperfects. Otherwise, one is left with the absurd situation of this dialogue taking place at a distance, both parties shouting after she has lowered them with the rope. Right. So just alter is just grammatically helping us understand. They had just been lowered down and now they're still having a conversation. It doesn't make sense to still have a conversation, especially since they're spies. So you can't whisper if you're being lowered down. And then if you're raising your voice, kind of defeats the purpose of being a spy. Other people are going to hear what you're saying. Okay. So on 16 below the line, go to the high country. This is the mountainous area to the west of the Jordan Valley and in the opposite direction from the one taken from the pursuers. Okay, so Alter is agreeing with our commentary here. The terrain would also have afforded hiding places. Yeah, there are a lot of caves around there in the sides of those hills. 3 days, as in chapter 1, the time span is formulaic, but it is also a plausible interval to wait until the pursuers have given up the chase. We will be clear of this vow, having stated that they are prepared to die in her stead should they violate the terms of the vow. They now stress that they will have no obligation to carry it out unless she strictly adheres to her own terms that they stipulate. This scarlet cord you must tie in the window. This is a purely practical stipulation. The attackers need a sign to know which house they are to spare. The scarlet cord recalls the scarlet cord attached to the hand of the newborn twin Zerach in Genesis 38:28, and probably also the blood smeared on the lintel to ward off the destroyer in Exodus 12:13. Yeah, so if you remember the story, and of Judah and his daughter-in-law Tamar, and Judah's 2 sons who are married to Tamar, who both die, and Tamar's waiting around for the 3rd brother to marry. Then Tamar plays a game and plays the harlot and gets Judah to sleep with her and to impregnate her. And though she is pregnant with twins, one reaches out his hand first. The midwife ties a red thread around it, around the wrist. Then the hand goes back in, and the other one is born first. Okay, so that's what the red thread, and up to this point, we've had 2 ideas of red being a sign, this red thread for that baby in chapter 38 of Genesis, and also the blood on the doorpost. Okay.
What does it mean now? Because I know I had to tie a red thread on the crib.
It's a fertility thing, a prayer for fertility. It's yeah, that's what it is. It's like a Sephardic superstition custom. So if you go to the Kotel, there are all these people trying to sell you a red thread to tie around your wrist. If you go to Rachel's tomb outside of Bethlehem, there'll be some people there trying to give you a red thread too. Mothers put a red thread on the crib to ward off the evil eye from the new baby. So it's well, so so we see it's protection here. So it's protection now. Okay. Verse 20 in on page 16, and should you tell of this mission of ours, we will be clear of your vow. The concluding statement regarding a release from the vow concerns the vital interest of the 2 spies, rather than the practical provision for the safety of Rahab and her family. 17, she tied the scarlet cord in the window. Though it's possible to understand this as an act she performs later, it may be that, mindful of the grave warning of the 2 men, she hastens to affix the agreed-on sign as soon as they leave, though she knows the attack will not come for at least several days. All along the way, this would be the road parallel to the Jordan. Crossed over, now they take a ford across the Jordan back to the Israelite camp. All the dwellers of the land quail before us instead of melt before us. They are directly quoting one of those inhabitants, Rachav, who in turn is quoting the Song of the Sea. Thus, the line from the poem becomes a kind of refrain that punctuates the middle and end of this episode, right? We had come across that word before. Okay, so let's start chapter 3. Let's read verses 1 to 4. Vayashkem Yehoshua baboker, Vayisu mehashitim vayavohu ad hayarden, hu v'chol bnei Yisrael vayalinu sham terem ya'avoru. Vayihi miktsei shloshet yamim, vayavru hashotrim bekerev hamachaneh. Vayetzavu et ha'am lemor, kir otchem et aron brit Adonai Elohechem, v'hakohanim haleviim nosim oto v'atem tis'u mimakomechem, v'halachtem acharav. Ach rachok yiheh benechem uvenav ke'alpayim ama bamida, al tikrevu elav lema'an asher ted'u et haderech asher telchuva, ki lo avartem baderech mitmol shilshom. Joshua got up in the morning, rose up early in the morning, and they traveled from Shittim, that's where they were camped, and they came to the Jordan River, he and all of the people of Israel, and they, I don't want to say camped because that's not the word for camp, they slept there, they lodged there, it says here, before they were to go over to cross the river. And at the end of 3 days, the magistrates, the officers, went through the midst of the camp, and they commanded the people, saying, when you see the ark of the covenant of God, your God, and the Kohanim and Leviim carrying it, and you will travel from your place and go after it. Okay, that'll be the sign. When you see the ark being carried by the Kohanim and Leviim, that'll be the sign to start moving. But stay back a distance between you and it, the ark, 2,000 cubits in measure. Right, how much is 2,000 cubits? A cubit is 1.5 feet. So what's that? 6,000 feet? No.
3,500.
How many? 3,500 feet. So half a mile, something like that. Stay half a mile back. I don't know who's marking off the distance, but stay back 2,000 cubits. Don't get close to it, so that you know the way to go, which you haven't gone on this way from before yesterday or 2 days ago, which is simply translated ever before or heretofore. Okay, so these 2 spies haven't come back to report to Joshua. This is in the meantime. This is what Joshua is saying. We've had 3 days here in Shittim. Now let's get ready to go. And when the Kohanim and Leviim take the ark, that'll be the sign to stay back 2,000 cubits. Okay, so let's look at the commentary. Early in the morning, the zealous obey God's precepts at the earliest possible moment. Right, so Vayashkem, he got up early. Right, we have a number of times in the Torah before this point where Abraham got up early to begin the journey with Isaac. So there are often places where people are getting up early. So the faithful that the Talmud is talking about, there's a custom to gather first thing in the morning at dawn for minyan. It's called a hashkama minyan. So the same root here. Vayashkem, he got up. Hashkama is getting up early. So hashkama minyan, Like there are even those on Shabbat who get up for a Hashkama minyan. So the more Orthodox shuls will have a variety of minyan times available for people. And one of those is the first thing in the morning minyan, like 7 o'clock in the morning on a Shabbat morning. For me, that's a God-forsaken time to gather for minyan. But for some people, they want to get up early, and it's the tradition to do that. And then, so like Beth Shalom in Potomac or Kent Mills Synagogue offer these variety of times in the morning to daven on Shabbat and also during the week. So the commentary goes on. Traditionally, it was on the 9th of Nisan, the day after the return of the spies. Okay, how they know this, I don't know. Well, they're going to be observing Passover soon. I know that because I've read the book of Joshua, and it is a Haftorah for the first day of Passover, taken from later in this chapter. So this is the 9th of Nisan. Well, Passover is coming, so perhaps they figured it out that way. Okay, after 3 days from the time of the proclamation, not from when they reached the Jordan. These 3 days correspond to the 3 days the spies were in hiding. All right, so this is how the commentary kind of makes the story fit together. The Ark of the Covenant, also called the Ark of the Testimony. The testimony was the 2 tables of stone inscribed with the Decalogue, which testified to the covenant between God and Israel, namely, that they would acknowledge and obey him as their God, while he would recognize them as his people. There is naturally no reference here to the tabernacle and its sacred appurtenances. The tabernacle was dismantled during the journey, and its appurtenances would play no part as guide in the crossing of the Jordan, as did the ark. So that's interesting for the commentary too, to point out where the daily sacrifice is happening in the Mishkan at this point. So the commentary is pointing out, no, the Mishkan had been dismantled because they're traveling. So daily sacrificial service was suspended during this time, which I think is also until they got to the city of Shiloh when they set it up. So I don't think the Mishkan is going to be set up again for several chapters. So it's just interesting the commentary is pointing that out for us. No Mishkan, just the Ark will be the sign for taking up arms and going into battle. The priests and the Levites, the priests who were all of the tribe of Levi. While all the priests were Levites, the converse was not true, because the priesthood was confined to the descendants of Aaron. Okay, about 2,000 cubits, that is 1,000 yards. This was the extent of the permitted Sabbath day's journey. Joshua said to them, in the future you will stand there and observe the Sabbath. Do not go more than 2,000 cubits from the ark on any side, so that you can go and pray before it on the Sabbath. Okay, so it's just the Midrash is adding the idea of 2,000 cubits being the Shabbat limit for travel, and the idea of approaching the ark on Shabbat. Yes, go ahead.
Is that that's not true anymore?
It is a basic idea about leaving the town limits on Shabbat by walking. You can't walk more than 2,000 cubits.
I know of this anecdotal, of course, a rabbi who was the Moyle in London. This is Shirley Altman's story. He had to make a circumcision on a Shabbos.
Right.
So he would walk for 2 hours. That was his maximum. Then he would visit with somebody, have a cup of tea,
right. Go
another 2 hours.
Right. Yeah, there are ways around it. And London, is a big city. So walking in the city of London could take all day, if not longer, to walk from one side to the other. So yeah, this is a way. You're not supposed to overtax yourself in walking on Shabbat. But if you're walking to do a mitzvah, like the Moel is, was, then this is the way to do it. And you make your stops on the way to have the halachic loophole there. Come not near unto it. Crowding around the ark would lead to confusion and would also lessen reverence for its sanctity. Okay. Let's see, alter on this. Crossed over, the verb avar, we're on page 18, which means either to cross over or, as in verse 2 and verse 4, to pass through or over, is repeated 8 times in this chapter, thus marking the episode as a portentous liminal moment when the people of Israel cross over from their long wilderness wanderings into the land they have been promised. At the end of 3 days, the recurrence of this formulaic interval suggests a certain symmetry with the experience of the spies who hide out in the high country for 3 days. The Ark of the Covenant. The Ark contains the stone tablets of the law. It's imagined as both a sacred and a magical object, and as such is also a numinous vessel carried into battle, as one sees in the early chapters of Samuel. So in other words, it's this it's this thing that is supposed to have God in it, that has certain powers that you need to have. And it's significant that in the book of Samuel, the ark is going to be captured by the Philistines. So that, and then David miraculously in battle brings it back, and people are rejoicing and singing and dancing in front of it. So it takes on this very sacred aspect as a holy object itself. But keep a distance. The ark, saturated with divine aura, is also a dangerous object. In 2 Samuel 6, when Uzzah puts his hand on the ark to prevent it from slipping from the cart in which it is carried, he is struck dead. About 2,000 cubits, this would be a little over half a mile. Okay, let's read on a little bit, 5 through 8. Vayomer Yehoshua, yes, okay. Vayomer Yehoshua el ha'am hit kadashu, ki machar yaseh Adonai b'kirbechem niflaot. Vayomer Yehoshua el hakohanim lemor, se'u et aron habrit v'ivru lifnei ha'am, vayis'u et aron habrit vayelchu lifnei ha'am. Vayomer Adonai el Yehoshua hayom hazeh achel gadelcha be'enei kol Yisrael asher yed'un ki ka'asher hayiti im Moshe eheyeh imach. Ve'ata tetzaveh et hakohanim nosei Aron habrit lemor ke vo achem ad kitzei mei hayarden ba'yarden ta'amodu. Joshua said to the people, be holy, or sanctify yourselves, because tomorrow God will do in your midst wonders, or will do wonders in your midst. Joshua said to the Kohanim, carry or pick up the Ark of the Covenant and walk amongst the people and carry the Ark of the Covenant and go before the people. And God said to Joshua, today, Hayom Hazeh, this very day, I will, well, it says here, I will begin to magnify you. Yeah. I will begin to make you great in the eyes of all of Israel, that they will know that just as I was with Moses, I will be with you. And you command the Kohanim, carriers of the Ark of the Covenant, saying, when you get to the edge of the Jordan waters, in the Jordan, you should stand or stand still. So stand still either at the edge of the Jordan or right at the where the water meets the bank, whatever it is, stand still there. Right, because there's going to be a miracle that the Jordan's going to split. I'm not giving anything away, but so there's going to be crossing the Jordan, just like crossing the Red Sea. Okay, so the commentary on 5-8. Sanctify yourselves, thus was the sacred character of their task impressed upon them. The sanctification usually consisted in ritual purification, which included the washing of garments and marital abstinence. Right, so Exodus 14 told us specifically how the people were to sanctify themselves. Here it just says sanctify yourselves, so we're supposed to assume that the people knew what that meant. The Ark of the Covenant, this was usually in the center of the camp. Now it was to be in front. Unto Joshua, as the campaign is about to begin, God renews to Joshua the assurance he had previously given to him. And there's only one verse that Alter comments on. As I was with Moses, I shall be with you. The wonder that God is about to perform will, in fact, replicate a miracle done for Moses. Right? The splitting of the Jordan. It's not quite the same. Splitting the sea is a little bit different than splitting the Jordan River, especially if you can picture what the Jordan River looks like today. Not as great a miracle necessarily, but still a miracle nonetheless. So we have time to go on a little bit more. We have time to finish the chapter. Let's see if we can finish the chapter. Vayomer Yehoshua el Bnei Yisrael goshu heina v'shim'u et divrei Adonai Elohechem. Vayomer Yehoshua bazot tedun ki el chai b'kirbechem v'horesh yorish mipnechem et haKenani v'et hachiti v'et hachivi v'et haprizi v'et hagirgashi v'et ha'emori v'hayevusi. Hinei aron habrit adon kol haaretz over lifnechem bayarden. Ve'ata kechulachem Shnei asar ish mishiftei Yisrael, ish echad lashavet. V'haya kenoach kapot raglei hakohanim v'nosei Aron Adonai Adon kol haaretz b'mei hayarden, mei hayarden yikaretun, hamayim hayordim milamala v'yamdu neid echad. Vayehi bin soa ha'am me ohalehem la'avor et hayarden v'hakohanim nosei ha'aron habrit lifnei ha'am u'chevo nosei ha'aron ad hayarden v'raglei hakohanim nosei ha'aron nit belu b'ktsei hamayim v'hayarden malei al kol gedotav kol yemei katzir v'yamdu hamayim hayardim milamala kamu neid echad harchek me'od. May the asterisk there says it's supposed to be May Adam Ha'ir Asher Mitzad Sartan V'Hayordim Al Yam Ha'arava Yam Hamelach Tamu Nichratu V'Ha'am Avru Neged Yericho V'Yamdu HaKohanim Nosei Ha'aron Brit Adonai B'Charava B'Toch HaYarden Ha'chein V'Chol Yisrael Ovrim B'Charava Ad asher tamu kol hagoy la'avor et hayarden. Joshua said to the people of Israel, come close, come here, and hear the words of God your God. And Joshua said, this is how you will know that the living God is among you. He will wipe out from before you the Canaanite, the Hittite, the Hivite, the Perizzite, the Girgashites, the Amorites, and the Jebusites. Here, the Ark of the Covenant is the master of the land, or the master of the land through the Ark of the Covenant passes before you over the Jordan. And now, take among you 12 men from the tribes of Israel, one for each tribe. And when the feet or the soles of the feet of the Kohanim who carry the ark of God Lord of the land in the water of the Jordan, then the water of the Jordan will stop, or it will be cut off. The water coming down from above will stop in one heap. And when the people travel, when the people traveled from their tents or left their tents to cross the Jordan, and the Kohanim carrying the Ark of the Covenant before the people, when the carriers of the Ark approached the Jordan, and the feet of the Kohanim carrying the Ark is set down at the edge of the water, the Jordan overflowed its banks at the time of the harvest. Well, yeah, so in other words, the Jordan at this time was overflowing its banks because it was springtime. So I guess all the winter rains made the Jordan that much. So this is much more of a miracle that the overflowing Jordan is now stopping. So verse 16, the water stopped from above. It piled up in a pile. Far from Adam, which is the city that's on the edge of Sartan. No idea where these cities are. And those that went down toward the Sea of Arava. So it's the Arava Valley. It is known here, it's usually the Dead Sea, but it's called here the Arava Sea, the Salt Sea. It stopped. So the water piled up in a heap on the northern side, and in the southern side, there's nothing flowing into the Dead Sea. It stopped. It's Tamu Nichratu. It stopped. It was cut off, and the people crossed across from Jericho. So there's this. That's along the way of the Jordan River where they were, where the Jordan stopped at one place and was not flowing on the other end, and they walked in the middle. And the Kohanim stood, carriers of the Ark of the Covenant of God, on dry land in the Jordan River itself, firm, and all of Israel crossed on the dry ground until all the people finished crossing the Jordan. Okay, so let's read the commentary here. Beginning with verse 10 on page 14, the living God, in contrast to the dead idols worshipped by other people. So in other words, why El Chai, the living God, is used here as a description of God. The Canaanite, etc., the 7 tribes inhabiting the land. Of these, the Canaanites and the Amorites were the most important, and they sometimes gave their name to the whole country. The former inhabited the low-lying districts in the east and west, the latter the hilly area in the center. All right, that's according to Numbers 13, that's how it was divided. For the Hittites, see chapter 1, verse 4. The Hivites were connected with Gibeon and Shechem, the Jebusites with Jerusalem, the Perizzites with the Rephaim, and the Canaanites. The Girgashites were of unknown locality. In God's promise to Abraham, other tribes are enumerated, which are not mentioned here, namely the Kenites, the Kenizzites, and the Cadmonites. On the other hand, the Hivites included here are missing there. So it's either 9 or 7 nations that were indigenous to the land. It's mostly the 7. Most of the Torah has the 7 that are listed here in Joshua. But it's just pointing out that with Abraham, we have a couple more who are mentioned. The Lord of all the earth, this phrase always designates God as he who expels and brings in. Here it denotes that he will drive out the Canaanites and bring in the Israelites in their stead. Okay, so that's one collection of midrash that's suggesting that. Take you, etc. The purpose is stated in chapter 4, 1-3. God's command there must be understood as having preceded the present instruction, the narrative not being in strict chronological order. Some suggest that ve'ata, now therefore, should be understood as meanwhile. Okay, the Ark of the Covenant, literally the Ark which is the covenant. So again in verse 17. Overflows all its banks all the time of harvest. It was the month of Nisan, March to April, the time of the barley harvest. At Jericho, the Jordan Valley is about 14 miles wide. That's the entire valley. Okay, and that seems to make sense. I can kind of picture that in my mind's eye. From the moment the road becomes flat, and if you were able to travel at that point all the way to the hill country in Jordan, so the width of the valley is about 14 miles wide. The river itself is from 90 to 100 feet broad, a rapid, muddy water with a zigzag current. The depth varies from 3 feet at some fords to as much as 10 or 12. So we'd have to look at the beginning of the book to see, or the end of the book, see who G.A. Smith is and when he wrote. But, 100 years ago, yes, it could have been 90 to 100 feet wide. Not sure it still is. The flood level of the Jordan naturally increased, the miracle of its waters being cut off. It has been objected that by March the rains are over and the Jordan's tributaries are mere rills. How then could the river overflow its banks in April? Thompson answers, the Jordan does not depend upon tributaries for its steady supply of water, but is almost wholly formed and fed by certain great fountains which arise far north around the base of snowy Hermon. The Jordan is thus made up from the joint contributions of great permanent springs, and in this fact we find the explanation of the overflow of the river so late in the season as March. The river keeps full and strong all through March into April, and the proper banks of the river are still full to overflowing in the time of the harvest. Okay, I don't know if these people were ever there, and Thompson or G.A. Smith to describe this, but it's possible that they were there and witnessed it there.
What are great fountains? Does he mean waterfall?
I think springs, underground springs. Adam, the city that is beside Sartan. This place name is not found elsewhere. An echo of this name may very plausibly be found in Tel Ed Damia and Jisr Ed Damia, names of a hill and bridge at the confluence of the Yabok with the Jordan, some 16 miles in a direct line above the ford opposite Jericho. Encyclopedia Biblica. Okay. According to Talmudic tradition, in the Jerusalem Talmud Sota, Sartan, which is called Sareda, and from 2 Chronicles, lay on the west side of the Jordan over against Adam and about 12 miles from it. The reference here is apparently to the top of Mount Sartaba. Holmes quotes a parallel from the Arabic chronicler Noariri, who describes how in December 1267, the Jordan was dammed for several hours in this neighborhood by a landslip. See also Condor, the Bible and the East, page 108 for a full description. Okay. Firm on dry ground, the miracle lasted so long as the priests stood there. Okay. So whether this was a miracle or whether this actually happened, according to an Arab chronicler, that sometimes the Jordan could stop up like this, whatever it is. So that the commentary is trying to give a place on the Jordan where this actually happened. Okay, so let's look at altar for this section. The Canaanite and the Hittite. In all, 7 peoples are mentioned. Oh no, sorry, 9 to 10. And Joshua said, as a rule, when the formula for introduction of dialogue is repeated without an intervening response from the second party, The repetition indicates some difficulty in response, puzzlement, amazement, embarrassment, and so forth. Here, the repetition has a purely dramatic function. Joshua invites the people to draw close. They do so, scarcely having an opening to say anything to him. Then, when his audience is gathered around him, Joshua goes on to give detailed instructions. The Canaanite and the Hittite in all 7 peoples are mentioned, filling out the formulaic number. The list itself is heterogeneous. Canaanite and Amorite are general designations for the inhabitants of this territory. The Hittites are immigrants from Asia Minor, Turkey, who were probably not a distinctive Canaanite people in any political sense. Little is known about the Perizzites and the Girgashites, though the latter may have come from Asia Minor. In any case, the enumeration of 7 peoples does reflect the historical memory of Canaan, divided up among small city-states. Master of all the earth, this is not an epithet that occurs in the Torah, and since designations of the deity are important indicators of sources, its use may point to a literary source distinct from those of the Pentateuch. So in other words, Alter is suggesting a different source for this oral tradition that becomes the book of Joshua. So El Chai, Adon Kol Haaretz is not a name of God that we encountered in Torah, so perhaps it's a different thread. Take for yourselves 12 men from the tribes of Israel. These men play no role in what immediately follows, though in the next chapter they are assigned the task of placing 12 stones in the riverbed. Though this verse could be construed as a prolepsis, it is more likely that it was erroneously transposed in copying from the next section of the story, where it is duplicated in chapter 4, verse 2. Okay. The waters of the Jordan coming down. This formulation harbors an etymological pun. The Jordan, Yarden in Hebrew, is called that because it comes down from the root Yud Resh Daled, from mountain heights in the north to the Dead Sea, the lowest point on the face of the earth. And it happened, the syntax of these 3 verses, constituting one long run-on sentence, is quite untypical of biblical prose, and its use here builds a sense of climatic fulfillment of the miracle as the miracle is enacted. The Jordan being full to all its banks throughout the harvest days, this rather awkward parenthetical clause, still further complicating the syntax, appears to be an effort to explain a difficulty. As we learned in chapter 2, there are numerous fords across the Jordan, and the 2 spies obviously used one of those to cross back and forth. But the story needs an impassable Jordan to enable the miracle of immobilizing its waters. And so we are reminded that in this moment, at the beginning of the spring, in the month of Nisan, the river would have been overflowing after the winter rains. The reference to harvest days is a little puzzling because early April is too soon for a harvest. Perhaps the phrase means to say that this high level of the Jordan continues until the end of the first harvest in late May, early June. Rose up in a single mound. These words are the clearest indication that this incident is a repetition of the drying up of the Sea of Reeds, because the rare term naid, mound, is used as it is in the Song of the Sea, Exodus 15:8-8. History for the biblical writers moves forward, but also repeats itself in significant patterns. This notion prepared the way for later typological conceptions of history. All right, so in other words, using words from one point in history, literarily from one point and into another point. Very far off in the town of Adam, which is by Santan. This odd and seemingly gratuitous specification of a place at some distance from the reported event is a strategy of documenting the miracle by locating it along geographical coordinates. The Arava Sea, the Arava is the geological rift through which the Jordan runs. Dry ground, the Hebrew here, Charava, is a different word from Yabasha, dry land, the term used in Exodus 14:15, and also Genesis. Okay, we stop here for today. We'll meet again next Friday. And wish everybody a good rest of the day and a Shabbat Shalom. And be well, everyone.
Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you.
Shabbat
Shabbat
shalom.
shalom.